Hi, I'm Edward Samuelson, host of CineFiles. Today, we're going to be talking about gripes. And I'm joined today by Eric Cohen and Mike Foltz. Today, we're going to talk about stuff that just irks us about, I guess, films in general and the film-going experience.
I have a gripe. Nudity. What happened to all the nudity in films? I saw a wonderful film last night called 300. You know something? You know why it was wonderful? One of the many reasons? It had nudity in it. It had female nudity. It had breasts, and it had ass. Hey, it had male nudity too. It had lots of buff bodies, but you don't see nudity. What happened to films like the sword and sandal films of yesteryear, like Beastmasters, where you had Tanya Roberts naked, Clash of the Titans, you had a wonderful nudity in there. You just don't see that anymore.
Hell, even Dragon Slayer, which is PG, and was released by Disney, had nudity in it.
Yes.
For God's sake.
And, what I mean, are we so slavishly devoted to red states now that we can't put a little skin in there? Yeah, we can have people's spines hanging out of their severed necks and flailing away. We can have heads exploding. We can see all manners of gore. But for some reason, a little nudity here and there, huh.
Well, you know what's very interesting is like the Europeans have a very different approach. I mean, sex is all right, but violence is where they draw the line. And you know what? What's more dangerous? Someone actually having sex with someone that they love and care about, or someone gorging someone's eyeballs out with their thumbs?
You know, I miss things like Friday the 13th, I think it was part 2, where the girl just takes off all her clothes, it's midnight, and she wants to go skinny dipping, and you see it all.
You could also argue that part of that, one of the response to that isn't so much that we're more, prudish nation nowadays, but it may just reflect the filmmakers themselves as well. There might be a lot of filmmakers out there that just don't give a crap about the nudity aspects of what they used to love. They just want to do the violence and the action.
Yeah, give us what we want.
Well, what makes me angry is that when you have like, let's say there's a movie that actually calls for nudity and it's actually, I guess they've justified in the movie. Mm-hmm. You know, an example, I'll give you a perfect example, which would be like Henry and June. Okay, that's a movie all about, you know, the sexual.
Anais Nin and Henry Miller.
Exactly, and it was it's a film that created the NC-17 rating because back then the X meant the, porn immediately. You know, that's what most people would assume. However, it didn't. But the NC-17 rating was created. Today, we'd probably be able to get lucky to get them in their bikinis. Because, I mean, I don't see any films that are like this anymore that push the envelope, you know?
I think a lot of that also, the reason why a lot of that it has happened, we don't see as much of that. I mean, he's talking about gratuitous sex and violence. You're talking about sex that probably is relevant to the plot, whatever's going on, which is an entirely different thing altogether. I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that in order to try to get as many people into the cinema as possible, and they want to get that like PG or PG-13 rating. You've had less and less sex in films and more action and violence. Of course, we're hypocritical in that it's okay to have violence, but it's not okay to have nudity. And we get even hypocritical about how we define nudity, what we're allowed to show in a woman versus what we're allowed to show in a man. And
And once again, it goes back to the very. We did a show previously about Philip K. Dick, and Philip K. Dick, one of the many themes that he explores in his books that translates into the movies is the evil of the corporate world. And once again, my gripe is the fact that the corporate influence on pictures today has a way of sanitizing these films and making them everything.
His gratuitous nudity.
Yeah, so we sanitize the films and we have to have everything. Roger Ebert, I think, brought up a wonderful point. Every film cannot be made from a Disney perspective. Every film is not going to be a family film.
I agree with you. I mean, in fact, I think what you said about the red states is a very interesting thing too. It was because I know you know this. John Ashcroft, of course, was the Attorney General. Not the Attorney General. What was his?
Yeah, no, you're right. He
Attorney
was the
General. Attorney General. And there's these very famous, beautiful pieces of art, these statues like of Justice, nude, holding the scales. Right. He actually had curtains put up around the statues over the.
Well, John Ashcroft and Sam Brownback and all the other religious zealots in government have a lot of problems, with just modern society. So. And
that's the thing. Is like, I don't want to get off the subject, but censorship is a problem that I'm having. Is what you're allowed to show and what you can't show. I mean, I was listening to the commentary for Reanimator, and Stuart Gordon was talking when they were originally filming the movie that they wanted to get an R rating. Of course, they couldn't get an R rating with that movie, but he actually said that the costume designer had to come over and put merkins on people. And merkins, in case you people don't know about it, fake pubes. Yeah. And actually they said they ran out of merkins, so they actually had to spray paint people's penises black to hide it.
Well, the thing
I actually do that on my own.
I think we have to be careful. I mean, I wouldn't entirely blame red states and all that stuff. I mean, we forget the whole exploitation market of the 70s and 80s were popularized in the southern states and the drive-in, stuff like that. I think it's not so much an issue of I think it's more like corporate censorship than it is anything to do with what, look, if the majority of America, if suddenly a film came out that had tits and ass, you know, and it was a big, huge, monumental hit, believe me, they'd be making movies with tits and ass. The issue with the Reanimator, they probably couldn't get their R, not so much because it was a film they want to release with nudity, but because it was an independently made film.
They have a very big bias.
Films don't get the same shake that the big studios do.
I actually gave you guys a copy of this film, Not Yet Rated, which talks about some of the bullshit with the MPA and all the ratings thing, and how independent films are treated differently than the studio films, and how films with, I guess, say, gay sex and straight sex are treated. And there's a huge discrepancy there between the films. I mean, how they're treated.
Yeah.
You know. Now, what do you think of the MPA? When you were talking about your gripe, my gripe is this: is that I freaking hate the PG-13 rating. To me, that is the absolute worst thing. And we have to thank our good friend, Mr. Steven Spielberg, for this PG-13 rating, because he's the one who created it with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And because of the PG-13 rating, you know, it's either you can have a midway just where it's a little bit violent, but not violent enough. Before, it was either family-friendly PG-13 or R. That was it, and that's the way I liked it. Today, you have the middle ground where you can just get a little bit of each to satisfy both, kind of. Mm-hmm. I hate that. I hate going to a horror movie and seeing a freaking PG-13 movie. I want to be scared. Real life is scary. It's not sanitized. If someone gets shot, I mean, I'm not saying, you know, making intentional. Violence is scary. It should be scary, and it should not be sanitized. It should not be PG-13.
Well, the thing is, there's a time when you slapped a rated X on a film didn't mean it was porn. It just meant it was going to be an exciting, exploitive, you know,
Fritz the Cat,
drive-in movie kind of thing.
Fritz the Cat
it was going to be dealing with issues that were not going to be seen in your everyday film.
In fact, there's a time when guys slapped X's on their films, even though they were like, there's no content in it whatsoever. They just knew it was going to make more money if they did.
Well, that's why what came up with the triple X rating. See, X was copyrighted by the MPA, so triple X came out by the porno industry, and they put it on there because it wasn't copyrighted. And they can just put it on any movie, and it automatically people knew it was a sex film.
And what was funny is that there was no double X.
But the thing is, I mean, you mentioned a point about the PG-13. It took someone with that much clout like Steven Spielberg for that to be created so that he could get his film released the way he wanted to, which is why there's this hypocrisy, and you could also be really cynical and say, okay, we don't want this guy from this independent film company whose film is being released at the same time as ours from a major production. We don't want to have any competition. If more people are going to see his film because there's nudity in it, then let's impose our power and say, no, there's nudity in that, slap an NC-17 on that.
Because to me, Steven Spielberg is the one who ruined Hollywood films as far as I'm concerned, and I know people say, oh, what are you talking about? Well, Poltergeist got released, and it was a PG film, and there was no PG-13 then. It was a pretty violent film for the time, and it should have been an R. I think it should have been R, but he's like, oh, it's not that bad. There's a scene where a guy rips his own face off, and in Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom, you got a guy who rips out someone's heart. That should be for an adult.
Well, let me tell you,
or don't do it.
The ghost film, The Grudge. I think the filmmakers, probably because of that PG-13, had to hold back some. They could have really went far with that, made it an R film, and made it into a really horrifying film. But you felt that in some aspects they were being kind of held back, and it wasn't,
Like you were talking about censorship.
Couldn't have been as effective as it should have been.
I believe it's self-censorship. I don't believe it's censored by a board. I believe it's censored by the filmmakers because they want that PG-13 rating. They can't push the envelope. They intentionally go, well.
They probably want to get more work.
I believe the director will go, well, I'd rather have it more violent or more this way, but you know what? I'm not going to get a PG-13, and the studio won't allow me to do that, so I got to cut it back myself. And that's the problem I have with films today. That's my biggest gripe with films today, is that I would like to go see a horror film and actually be scared. Granted, there is a rare occurrence where you will see an R-rated film that's pretty pushes the envelope, like the Saw films. But then you get tons of these terrible, like, children's films like The Grudge.
Well, my thing is like, I don't think, there are films that, pushing the envelope. Some people, there's like some fans that are saying, well, it has to be gorier than that and blah, blah, blah. I don't necessarily believe that a film can be better if it's gorier or, like, I don't think the Saw films push the envelope, quite honestly. I really don't think they do.
If you saw Saw 3, I think you'd change your mind.
It depends on how you define pushing the envelope. If it's just like for the sake of saying, oh, gee, how sadistic can we get in a creative way than we did in the last film, a film before that? It's like the Friday the 13th series. It's no longer about a scary concept. It's about, okay, how do we outdo what we did in the last film? Okay, we had this guy decapitated this way, so what can we do that's even better than that? Then it becomes all about sadism, and it's no longer about making a good movie.
It's a double standard, like you're saying. Like, how you have people who are actually self-censoring to get a PG-13 rating, and there's some people who actually want to push the envelope to make it gory for no reason. I don't care for gore. I don't mind it if it adds to a story, but I don't want to see someone's heart ripped out and, stepped on just to, make me sick. I want to actually
Well,
aid
there's
in
just
the story.
there's lazy filmmakers out there that are sitting around going, "What can we give the audience that they haven't seen before?" I mean, just like that Touristas.
Oh,
I
God,
understand
that's so fucking bad.
there's a scene where a guy's getting his like stomach ripped
A
open.
woman,
and-
actually, a woman is actually alive, and they take her liver out while she's alive. You know, because they're doing the movie you've seen 10 million fucking times as what's it called, Coma.
My understanding of that movie, though, isn't really a horror film. Turns out it's just a thriller.
It's a thriller. I saw it in the theater.
Like it was a totally misleading ad campaign.
I saw it in the theater, and I thought, well, maybe it'd be fun. I go see it, and it's just totally stupid. It's generic filmmaking. In fact, it got an R, but it could have been a PG-13 because it's the same type of filmmaking.
I just feel that a lot of
Sanitized.
horror films today. Well, that could be another gripe of mine. A lot of horror films today are torture films. Horror and torture, I think, are two different things.
Thank you. I'm, as Erica and I, we're the big horror fans on the show. I mean, I think you'll agree with me.
I am a big horror fan.
You like horror fans?
What the hell's going
You're
on?
not a real horror fan.
You haven't seen Let's See
I'm a
Corpses
fan
Lie.
of horrors.
Well, that's our favorite genre, one of our favorite genres. I mean,
I love the horror genre.
Horror is
And there's, I grew up as a kid watching things like Chiller, on TV, and
The
they would show all
Hand,
these great
Grave.
movies that were out, 70s. I thought like the best horror films were the films that were made on a really low budget, and because of that, they had only these few minor resources, so they had to do the best of what they got. And there's some really creative, really creepy stuff that came out as a result of that.
creative filmmaking, not gore filmmaking.
Right, and nowadays, like, there's too many resources. It's too easy to like have a film with special effects. Now, computer animation.
You know what it is?
So much easier.
You know what it is? It's the over-reliance on CGI, rather back in the old days when you had an over-reliance on good writing.
But it's not even that. It's like it's
Because there's definitely
all
not
the
a
horror
dearth of
films.
good writing.
I mean, like I almost want to say goddamn Japanese horror. Even though there's some great Japanese horror films out
Thank
there.
you.
But thanks to The Ring popularizing that to an American audience, now you got all these films that got to have that look like Japanese horror. And now all the films, like the remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Hills Have Eyes, all have that same look, that same kind of like almost monochrome look in the cinematography and all the ad campaigns are the same, but scratchy look.
It's scratchy, but not only is that J-horror, that's also David Fincher's Seven. I mean, a lot of that. I mean,
Well,
it looks like we're watching work prints half the time.
Yeah, but David Fincher's Seven came out before all this stuff started
95.
becoming really popular, and what I would argue is
No,
David
there was a
Fincher-
lot of after Seven. There was a lot of copycats.
Well,
on
the thing-
Seven.
You're right.
The thing that I want to say about J-horror, and I'm going to say this because I'll give back to you. I just want to say, J-horror is a carbon copy of American stuff done Japanese style, and then now we're doing carbon copies of carbon copies in America. That's the problem.
Well, there's a difference.
Lost in
though.
translation.
There is a difference between what J-horror copied. Yeah, J-horror obviously was influenced by Western stuff. However, what makes J-horror uniquely Asian and Japanese is a sense of fatalism that goes back in their tradition of ghost stories. And
Yeah, there's some great
storytelling.
stories. It's like Kaidan. Kaidan is
Quite,
terrific.
there's always a sense of fatalism that you cannot escape this curse. There's no way. I mean, in
And
Western horror,
I love that.
They can be more like fables, where okay, you have this thing. There's a haunted house. At least you can escape it, or you can stop the witch, kill it, whatever. But in Japanese horror, if there is a curse, you're cursed.
There's a poison.
There's no cure for
There's
it.
a poison, and there's no antidote. You're fucked.
Yeah, you're
I like
fucked.
that.
And that's
I even made up a little thing of it called the theory of the juggernaut, which means no matter what happens, you're not going to get out of the way of this thing. It's coming at you, and that's that.
And your thing is this, is just to deal with it in the short time that you have. And that's why I like it. Like, I'll give you an example. Like I was saying, Kaidan. Kaidan is one of the most beautifully filmed horror films I've ever seen. It's 4 short stories, kind of an anthology. In fact, Tales from the Dark Side, the movie, ripped off one of the stories verbatim because it was not released. It was cut when it was released in America. Only 3 stories were shown here. And it was not, there was no real gore. It was all beautiful cinematography, great filmmaking, and great writing. Today,
it was
we
also
don't have
made
that.
in like the early 60s.
Yeah, I mean, but it's
something like
experimental
that, but
filmmaking. But I mean,
That is a beautiful film.
But I mean, I didn't want to get off that topic there, but I know exactly what you're talking about. There's just no creativity today. Like you were saying, these early films, they didn't know, well, we can't give them great special effects, but let's give them a great story.
Well, you know,
Death Dream, that's a perfect example of a great horror film in the 70s.
I agree.
Really low budget, but a solid story.
What's that?
Very, very good
Death
story.
Dream?
Yeah, Deathstream, based
Deathstream is
on
great.
based on The Monkey's Paw, which
That's
is
a perfect example.
horrifying short story.
And there was a sense in those days that they took what they were doing seriously. You know, even if it got ridiculous and really cheap looking. I mean, we talked about like the what was it, the Legend of Hell House. Say what you will about the drawbacks.
Yeah,
of that
the
film.
fake cat
There's
or whatever.
a sense of like we are taking this story seriously.
Yeah.
You know, let's try to make it scary. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
But I mean, you started out The Legend of Hell House with a wonderful writer in Richard Matheson. You started with a. I feel, and you know something, guys like John Carpenter and Joe Dante and George Romero, these guys had to cut their teeth as storytellers to get their product out there. They became legends for a reason. We have a lot of lazy filmmakers out there that are tools of the studio, that they shot a couple good beer commercials, they're handed a script, and they must walk into the office and goes, I did the Budweiser Frogs, give me a horror film.
That's a perfect example of what I don't like. Another reason what I don't like is that back in the 70s and things, you had people who were independent filmmakers, like, you know, like Bob Clark, who did Death Dream. These are people that actually loved making movies. They wanted to make movies. Today, you have people like Brett Ratner and Michael Bay. They're not into making movies because they like making movies. They like to make money. And that's the biggest problem that I have today with Hollywood.
Also, it was a different kind of industry then, too. They were making movies for, like, certain kind of markets, and they were actually making movies that were going to be screened in movie theaters, whereas today, a lot of these guys are making movies that are going to go direct to DVD.
Yeah, but
You know,
they're under but they're also under the
Right.
umbrella of super corporations
Exactly.
too.
It's all
It's a
corporate.
bottom line, and how much you're tailing the bottom line or whatever.
But yeah.
Well, who's got the next? I'll throw another gripe out there, which is absolutely nothing to do with what we're doing, talking about. But we always bitch and moan about like what actors we think are very undeserving of stuff. And I went on many rants about Will Smith, and I know Edwin loves talking about the undeserving talents of or lack of talents of Ben Affleck. But I'll say this right now: Mark Wahlberg. I read an interview with him in Premiere Magazine. He's actually a lot more stupid than most of the characters he plays on TV and or in movies. And it was just very depressing. And
You mean Marky Mark?
He's very religious, which is, I'm not saying that's a problem, but he was such a party boy and such a tabloid header that he's like an uber Catholic and has been all his life. It's very strange. And his performances, other than his supporting nod in The Departed and the other supporting role he had in I Heart Huckabees, he plays the same person all the time. And he plays this, like, you know, Boston thug that's a cop or that he's a thief. And we can say that is like Denzel Washington. He plays a cop like 4 out of 5 roles, it seems. And that was a bitch of mine before, but you could also point that to Sam Jackson. That he's always this type of character. But Mark Wahlberg, there's so many wonderful young actors that can get a shot. I mean, just to see Mark Wahlberg and Leonardo DiCaprio like growing up, I mean, it's unbelievable the canyon in talent between these two guys.
Well, the thing you mentioned too is like if he's playing himself. The thing is that many actors have played themselves. Schwarzenegger, John Wayne, but they had a great presence about them, and it was an entertaining character that they were. I don't see that in Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, well, he completely lacks charisma. He's maybe like a half a step up from Josh Hartnett in the charisma department. And
well, it's like the whole Marky Mark thing. It's like his stepping stone was his music career, and then somehow he slipped into being an actor.
And that was a horrible music career.
Be interested to see like say 10 years from now we're still doing this.
Yeah.
What we're going to say about Justin Timberlake.
I'll give you another gripe. I'm going to go back to Spielberg for a minute. Spielberg, for me, is what has ruined the Hollywood filmmaking. In the 70s, after the MPA ratings were established, people went on to make the most amazing films ever to come out of Hollywood. You had Hal Ashby, you had Robert Altman, you had
Peter Bogdanovich.
You had, give me some more here.
Martin Scorsese.
Martin Scorsese, there's a perfect example. And there's one more I would love to mention.
Billy Friedkin.
There you go, William Friedkin. Look at all these directors. Francis Ford Coppola. Who are we getting today? We have Michael Bay.
Brett
Ratner. We have Mick G. You know, I mean, these are the people we have, and it's just like, excuse me, what I don't like is Spielberg.
Robert Rodriguez.
Well, he made his best film is his first film, and that's it, as far as I'm concerned. But the thing about it is, Spielberg in 1975 made Jaws. Good movie, very good movie. But the problem with that is that studios saw, well, hey, wait, this is a big summer action film released in the summer. We can just release these and make our own exploitation films. And we can do it better than the independent people, and we can make more money.
I give the producers more credit for Jaws than I actually give Spielberg on that. And he had some really competent acting, some of the best actors
And
going
editing.
at that time. And they really took it upon themselves to really flesh out these characters and make them wonderful.
Robert Shaw, of course.
I give a lot of credit to Raiders of the Lost Ark, to George Lucas.
That's a movie I like. Those are the only two Spielberg films I like, are Jaws and Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, but I mean, look, Spielberg directed Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I give him that. He did.
But
and the more we hear about George Lucas now as a filmmaker, you know, you begin to realize
the concept, the storyline.
Actually, the story was Philip Kaufman's.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the
I did
original
not know
idea
that.
was to make their own James Bond film. That was their original idea. Spielberg said, I would love to make a James Bond film. In fact, he went after Broccoli for years. Please let me direct the next Bond film. And so he got together with George Lucas and said, we should do something together. What do you want to do? Let's do a Bond film. It's like, well, we can't do that. Well, let's do a Bond-like film. And the original concept of Indiana Jones was this like seductive kind of, you know, ladies' man, but adventurer type.
They came up with it on the beach in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
But
that's another example of, like, you know, him coming up with their own concepts because they couldn't get the rights.
Philip Kaufman wrote the original story. That he was hired to do that. They thought he would actually direct it at one point.
And that's another great
Get
director,
Tom
by the way.
Selleck involved. This is not really great.
Another
folks. We're
great,
so on a
another great
tangent
director
right
come
now.
out of the 70s is
We are
Phil
on a
Kaufman.
Well, since we're on a tangent directors.
But I want to finish it. The thing about this is the Hollywood movies that you got, that the Hollywood started to move away from these great character movies that Robert Altman would make. I mean, today were box office poison. They said, well, fuck this. We're just going to make big summer action movies from now on.
Well, Jaws and Star Wars led to the whole let's make money
And it killed
everything. But this is
creative
this is
filmmaking.
like the same argument. I mean, over and over again. Of course, 70s where it was the heart of the cinema. That was the golden age, and then the 80s where everything fell apart, and then we had, you know, whatever. What were you going to say about directors?
I was going to say,
ahead.
and then you get like the real cynical thing, like why are certain directors ever hired to do anything, like the Paul Andersons, the Uwe Bolls.
Please go on with it.
Why the hell is Uwe Boll alive? Who the hell is Uwe Boll? Uwe Boll, this German filmmaker. I have to give the only nice criticism I'll give about this guy. He is one hell of a businessman. He just basically goes out, buys the rights for all these video games, and he turns them into movies that have absolutely nothing with the video games rights that he bought. So you have Alone in the Dark, House of the Dead, Blood Rain. Now, I haven't seen Blood Rain. I have seen House of the Dead. I have seen Alone in the Dark. They are mind-numbingly awful. They are bad. They're terribly written. He has this talent for hiring real actors. Ben Kingsley is in Blood Rain.
Yes, he is.
Michael Madsen. And Michael Madsen is in
Blood Rain.
And he plays a medieval character, but sounds exactly like Michael Madsen
So
for many of his
obviously,
other
Uwe
roles.
Boll has some sort of talent, you know?
What's just so
talent?
funny is that each time he makes a movie, he gets more and more money. First, he started out with House of Dead with Jürgen Prochnow was his big actor name. Then the next one was Stephen Dorff and Tara Reid with
Christian Slater. And God, Alone in the Dark is just mind-numbing. I mean,
It's awful.
This gives you an idea of how bad a filmmaker he is. Apparently, he co-writes, comes up with his own stories, directs it. So he's the only person to blame. He has a hero who, for some reason, in order to designate, in order for the audience to recognize that he's the hero, has to wear this badass long leather jacket coat. He always has to wear the same muscle shirt. He's got like the unshaven shadow. It's not like he's a bounty hunter. He's a guy that's just traumatized from something that happened in his childhood. But for some reason, in order so that we can recognize that he's a hero, he's got to wear this badass outfit that was like considered badass in the early 80s, and canon films. And it just doesn't make sense. And he wears this when he's on a plane. He wears this when he goes to work. He probably sleeps.
It's like a uniform.
And, Uwe Boll probably said to Christian Slater, in order to get into this character, I want you to shower and sleep in this outfit. And he probably did. It is a fucking stupid movie.
Well, speaking of not making sense, don't they make Tara Reid into a
Tara Reid
she's
is
a
like
doctor.
she's an professor of archaeology.
See, you can't even say that with a straight
I can't
face.
say it with a straight face, but I mean, and she's obviously drunk throughout the whole film because her eyes are never fully open.
I just kept looking at her tits the whole time saying, hey, man, I wonder how bad those things are, because that was after her pictures. I couldn't take her seriously. I was drowsy. I mean, it's better than House of the Dead, but god damn is it stupid. And this,
Well, would argue it's not better than House of the Dead because at least House of the Dead had a camp entertainment value to it because it was so terrible. Alone in the Dark was his attempt at doing, okay, this is my serious big budget kind of, and it's just bad.
I blame the people today. I blame the people actually, you know why? Because if people wouldn't see his movies, they wouldn't make any money and he wouldn't get money. But he keeps getting money to make more movies. In fact, he's making 2 more.
Somehow he's getting away with this stuff, and I guess that's his talent. He's a phenomenal businessman of some sort.
He is the German video game filmmaker version of Eric Schaefer.
Oh,
Eric Schaefer.
God,
I don't know how that guy ever made movies either. And,
I met Eric Schaefer's mom.
What an egotistical.
She was very proud of her son.
He is probably one of the top 3 worst filmmakers in the history of anything I know about cinema. He is horrible.
I just caught a few minutes of his movie last night on TV, actually 2 nights ago on TV. I think it was called Held Up or something to that extent.
He's a very narcissistic filmmaker.
It was so bad. It's awful. Alan King, I felt so bad for him. I was like, damn, man, retire. Now he's dead, but I mean, hell, it was so bad.
That might have killed him, actually.
I think it did. I mean, every scene is like this trying to be like quirky, independent filmmaking that you've seen recycled from other directors. It's like he's trying to make it his own. It's like a person with their glasses looking, and then you look through the glasses, you see the glasses, look again. It's just like, I've seen this. This filmmaking might have been good 15 years ago by Hal Hartley, but not by you. You suck. Please quit. And I don't know how he keeps getting money for these movies. Fall, he writes himself a full frontal nude buff scene to show himself off, and it's just like, dude, I don't want to see that.
Or
put it away.
He writes himself in as the tortured artist who romancing Elle McPherson.
That's my favorite line in a Leonard Maltin guide. He goes, "It's a bad movie, but at least Eric Schaefer was smart enough to make a lot of makeout scenes with Elle McPherson."
Baz, what's his name? Brothers McMullen.
Oh, Ed Burns.
Ed Burns. He's almost. I mean, Ed Burns is almost as bad as that.
But at least he's not as big as an egomaniac.
He's an egomaniac.
He's a bit of an egomaniac.
But not as bad as Eric Schaefer.
He loves casting him, making these films so he can cast himself in the lead and play these parts where he's the guy who happens to have all these.
And he's one of the worst actors known to man right now. I mean,
people see A Sound of Thunder.
He makes Mark Wahlberg look like Olivier.
Hey, Mark Wahlberg's at least given some good performances.
Yeah. You cannot say that about Ed Burns. Ed Burns has never had a good performance.
Ed Burns is like fucking boring. He's like a pod person. He has no personality.
If Ben Affleck is not good, then Ed Burns is not good.
Well, we could say this. We got to wrap this up, but we don't say this. Avoid Ed Burns, films by Ed Burns, starring and directed by him.
Avoid Uwe Boll films.
Avoid those. Avoid Eric Schaefer. That's #1 on my list, people.
No Eric Schaefer. I wouldn't necessarily. I would say check out Uwe Boll just to get a good laugh.
If you like any film by Eric Schaefer or Uwe Boll, please check yourself into the Bellevue Psychiatric Hospital. They're open 24 hours a day.
Jump out the window.
Thank you.
Boy, you're going to have to edit this sucker.
That's okay. I don't mind.
That was actually kind of fun.
That was actually kind of fun.
I told you, our gripe shows are always great.
It's funny how many gripes we suddenly came up with on the fly.
What now?
Hi, I'm Edwin Samuelson, host of CineFiles. Today, we're going to be talking about gripes. And I'm joined today by Eric Cohen and Mike Foltz. Today, we're going to talk about stuff that just irks us about, I guess, films in general and the film-going experience.
I have a gripe. Nudity. What happened to all the nudity in films? I saw a wonderful film last night called 300. You know something? You know why it was wonderful? It's now that we can't put a little skin in there. Yeah, we can have people's spines hanging out of their severed necks and flannel white. We can have heads exploding. We can see all manners of gore. But for some reason, a little nudity here and there, huh?
Well, you know what's very interesting is like the Europeans have a very different approach. I mean, sex is all right, but violence is where they draw the line. And you know what? What's more dangerous? Someone actually having sex with someone that they love and care about, or someone gorging someone's eyeballs out with their thumbs?
You know, I miss things like Friday the 13th, I think it was part 2, where the girl just takes off all her clothes, it's midnight, and she wants to go skinny dipping, and you see it all.
You could also argue that part of that, one of the response to that isn't so much that we're more, prudish nation nowadays, but it may just reflect the filmmakers themselves as well. There might be a lot of filmmakers out there that just don't give a crap about the nudity aspects of what they used to love. They just want to do the violence and the action.
Yeah, give us what we want.
Well, what makes me angry is that when you have let's say there's a movie that actually calls for nudity and it's actually, I guess they've justified in the movie. Mm-hmm. You know, an example, I'll give you a perfect example, which would be like Henry and June. Okay, that's a movie all about, the sexual romps.
Anais Nin and one of the many reasons, it had nudity in it. It had female nudity. It had breasts, and it had ass. Hey, it had male nudity too. It had lots of buff bodies, but you don't see nudity. What happened to films like the sword and sandal films of yesteryear, like Beastmasters, where you had Tanya Roberts naked, Clash of the Titans, you had a wonderful, wonderful nudity in there. You just don't see that anymore.
Hell, even Dragon Slayer, which is PG, and was released by Disney, had nudity in it.
Yes.
For God's sake.
And, what I mean, are we so slavishly devoted to red state?